Not long ago, I sat across from a physician who shared something that really stuck with me. He said, "Lauren, I always thought I'd be retired by now. I figured 60, maybe even late 50s. But here I am in my late 60s still working. And honestly, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." That conversation, I hear versions of it all the time. The expectation was to retire in your 50s or 60s, but the reality? You look around your department and you see colleagues still practicing in their 70s. So what's really going on? Why do some physicians step away with confidence while others are still working years later than they initially hoped? Despite what you may think, it's not because one earned more or had better luck or was better with their money. The real answer is deeper. And once you see it, your perspective on retirement planning will never look the same. I'm Lauren Oshman, a certified financial planner, certified divorce financial analyst, and CEO at Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors. I'm also the daughter of an interventional cardiologist, so I'm incredibly passionate about helping physicians. Our team works with physicians across the country, and we've seen what helps them retire when they want to, and what quietly keeps them working long past their initial plans. Today, I want to walk you through the 3 biggest traps we see physicians fall into and the one mindset shift that changes everything. Let's start here. The issue isn't that doctors don't earn enough. Medicine's one of the highest paying fields in the country. The issue is how dependent that income is on your hard work. If you stop working, the income stops too. And that's very different from how many other professionals build wealth. Business owners, for example, might grow ownership in something or create passive income streams. But for most physicians, every dollar earned requires physically being in the hospital, in clinic, or in the OR. That reality makes your financial choices in your 30s, 40s, and 50s even more critical because those choices can effectively trap you into practicing longer than you ever expected. And it's not just about living a big lifestyle. Some doctors chase arbitrary magic numbers, 5 million or 10 million they think they need to retire without knowing what that number actually means for their retirement lifestyle. And others wrestle with the question, if I'm not practicing medicine, who actually am I? These are the hidden reasons that physicians are reticent to actually retire. Let's unpack those one by one. Because if you don't see them early, they can cost you more than money. They can cost you time. And that matters because that time amounts to years of your life you can't get back. Think back to your first attending paycheck. After years of sacrifice, it felt like you could finally breathe and start living your life. So you took the dream trip, upgraded the car, and bought your forever home. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. You earned it. Here's the piece that often gets missed though. Those purchases don't just cost you up front. They become long-term commitments. Mortgage payments, tuition, membership dues. There isn't much room to save after that. And because your income depends on you showing up at work, those commitments tie you to work longer than you might want to. I've met doctors who expected to retire at 60 and found themselves still practicing at 70. Unfortunately, not because they love it, but because they can't afford to stop. And especially considering how prevalent burnout is in medicine today, the weight of that reality is heavy. Now, keeping up with a big lifestyle isn't the only trap. Even physicians who live modestly and save can get caught in this next one. Most doctors that I talk to have some number in mind that they think they need to retire. 5 million, 10 million. But when I ask where that number came from, it's usually a shrug. A colleague mentioned it, or, I don't know, I read it somewhere. The problem? That number is completely arbitrary. It doesn't reflect your lifestyle, your income sources, or your actual goals. And because it's arbitrary, and physicians tend to be overly ambitious, the finish line keeps moving. You hit 5 million and start thinking 7. You hit 7, wonder if maybe you can hit 10. So you never actually feel ready. I've seen physicians with $4, $5, $6 million saved who are still afraid to retire. They're still working, not because they need to, but because they're chasing a moving target. They don't understand what that number actually means or whether it's actually right for them. And by the time they realize that they were actually already financially free, years have passed and they can't get those years back. Even if your spending is in check, Even if you've hit your number, there's still one more trap that can keep doctors working longer than they want. For many physicians, medicine isn't just your career. It's who you are. You've worn the white coat for decades. It's been your purpose and a source of great pride. A doctor shared with me that her parents were never more proud of her than the day she graduated from medical school. And still today, 25 years into her career, her father beams with pride as he affectionately calls her Doc. You give so much of yourself to caring for others, and you know how much that matters, which means the finality of retirement can feel extremely unsettling. You wonder who you are without medicine. You wonder what you'll do with your time, and will you still feel a sense of purpose? These aren't financial questions, they're emotional ones. And because they're difficult to address, and it feels uncomfortable to dwell on them, inertia takes over and physicians keep working. Again, not because they can't afford to retire, but because their whole path to this point was laid out for them, and this time they don't know what comes next. That uncertainty keeps them stuck. So let's zoom out. Keeping up with a big lifestyle, chasing an arbitrary number, wrestling with identity. 3 different traps that all lead us to the same result. Physicians practicing years longer than they intended because they aren't confident that they can actually retire. So, what separates those who retire early from those who don't? It's not more income, it's not better luck, it's clarity. Because clarity shifts everything. When you have clarity, you don't spend blindly on your lifestyle, you don't chase arbitrary benchmarks, and you don't fear life after medicine. You actively plan for it. So how do you get that clarity? That's where defining what we call wealth that matters makes all the difference. Instead of starting with a number, we start with your life, your family, and your dreams. What kind of life do you actually want in retirement? Well, that cost. Not your colleague's version, not the internet's version, yours. Then we look at your current resources, your hospital 403b, 457, your practice 401k, profit sharing plan, and map that against the cost of what you envision. There's almost always a gap between those numbers. We identify the magnitude of that gap and then build a focused strategy to close it. That's clarity. And I've seen this with hundreds of physicians. It ultimately builds confidence around the life you actually want to live. Here's how it works. Step 1, define your desired retirement lifestyle and the associated cost. Step 2, map the trajectory of what you're saving, including hospital or practice matches, into your hospital or practice-based retirement plan. Step 3, find the gap between the current inputs and your desired outcome. And step 4, make an action plan to close that gap. It's that simple. When you understand the numbers, you stop overspending without realizing it. You stop chasing arbitrary goals. And you stop worrying about what happens when that paycheck ends. Instead, you start making intentional, values-based choices. Do you want to keep practicing medicine? That's great. Now it's on your terms. Do you want to step back early? You'll know when you can. Clarity gives you that freedom. And here's the impact. I worked with a high-achieving academic attending who had always assumed she needed $5 million to feel secure enough to retire. She was sharp, thoughtful, and had been diligent about saving. But every time we talked about her slowing down, she'd just say, I'm not there yet. So we mapped out her lifestyle, not just the fixed expenses, but how she actually wanted to live in retirement. Travel, family time, volunteering, charitable giving, and we compared those real costs to her income streams, some Social Security, her retirement accounts, and even a couple small rental properties. It became clear. She didn't actually need $5 million. She was already financially free. She didn't need more dollars. She just needed that clarity. And once she had it, she confidently gave notice to her chair to retire 3 years earlier than planned. In her words, I didn't realize how much of this was mental until I really felt at peace knowing I was okay. Another physician used this process a bit differently. He wasn't ready to retire, but his practice was short-staffed and he knew the pace of full-time call coverage especially was draining him and taking too much from his family. So we looked at what scaling back would mean. both financially and personally. He ended up shifting into a part-time role at a teaching hospital, picking up some locums, and spending more time traveling with his family. He didn't increase his income, he increased his clarity. And that clarity gave him freedom to make changes that he'd actually been dreaming about for years. So, why do some doctors retire in their 60s while others are still working into their 70s? It's not income, it's not luck, it's clarity. And the timing of when you get it. Most doctors wait too long, assuming they'll figure it out later. But life moves fast, and later comes quickly. The longer you wait, the fewer options you have. The best time to get clarity is now. Not someday, not when burnout forces your hand. Now. Because every year you wait, you have less space to course correct. If you want to know where you really stand, email our team at myteam@vestia.com and we'll help you build a plan to live your wealth that matters.